The gymnasium at Jefferson High School carries the weight of 40 years of victories and defeats. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting harsh shadows across the polished wooden floor where generations of young athletes have learned that discipline, they're told, is the foundation of success. This Tuesday afternoon, the sound of sneakers squeaking against hardwood fills the air as Coach Marcus Reynolds surveys his team with the intensity of a military sergeant. Before we get into the part that still hurts to tell, let us know where you're watching from and hit subscribe so you don't miss more deep, raw stories like this. At 52, Coach Reynolds has built his reputation on unwavering principles. No excuses, no exceptions. Show up, work hard, or find somewhere else to be. His office walls are lined with championship trophies, newspaper clippings, and team photos spanning 2 decades. Each image tells the same story: success through discipline, victory through sacrifice. "Where's Johnson?" Coach Reynolds' voice cuts through the rhythmic dribbling of basketballs. His eyes scan the huddle of 17 young men, all in their practice jerseys, all accounted for except one. The players exchange glances. Tommy Martinez, the team captain, shifts uncomfortably. "Coach, I think he might be." "I don't think anything," Reynolds interrupts. "Either he's here or he's not, and he's not." The coach's jaw tightens, a familiar storm brewing behind his steel-gray eyes. This is the 3rd practice this month. 3rd. What Coach Reynolds doesn't see is the weight pressing down on each player's shoulders. What he doesn't know is that behind every jersey is a story, and some stories are heavier than others. In his world of black and white, showing up is a choice. In theirs, sometimes it's a luxury. The missing player is Malik Johnson, a 17-year-old junior whose talent on the court is matched only by the invisible burdens he carries off it. While his teammates warm up, Malik is 15 miles across town, his uniform stuffed in a backpack, his heart torn between 2 worlds that demand everything and offer little understanding. "Run suicides," Coach Reynolds barks. Since Johnson thinks practice is optional, everyone pays. The team groans collectively, but they know better than to argue. As they line up along the baseline, their legs already burning from the anticipation of punishment, each player wonders about their missing teammate. Some feel anger, others feel worry. All feel the weight of collective punishment for one person's absence. Tommy Martinez touches the baseline and explodes into his sprint, his mind racing faster than his feet. He knows something the coach doesn't. He knows that Malik's absence isn't defiance, it's survival. But in Coach Reynolds' world, context is weakness, and explanations are excuses. The whistle blows again. Another suicide, another sprint, another reminder that in this gymnasium, individual circumstances bow to collective discipline. But today, something is different. Today, the universe is preparing to turn the tables in ways that will challenge everything Coach Reynolds believes about leadership, about his players, and about the invisible battles fought far from the bright lights of the basketball court. As the team continues their punishment runs, the heavy gymnasium doors creak open. A figure enters quietly, observing from the shadows. The man's presence is unmistakable, tall, dignified, with eyes that have seen triumph and tragedy in equal measure. He watches the punishment unfold, his expression unreadable, his purpose unknown. Coach Reynolds notices the visitor but doesn't recognize him immediately. In this moment, his focus is singular, making his point about accountability. What he doesn't realize is that he's about to receive a lesson in accountability himself. The afternoon light filters through the high windows, casting long shadows across the court. In a few hours, these shadows will reveal truths that will shake the foundation of everything Coach Reynolds thinks he knows about the young men he's trusted to guide. The next morning arrives with the weight of unfinished business. Coach Reynolds sits in his office, coffee growing cold in his hands, staring at the team roster. His red pen hovers over Malik Johnson's name like a sword waiting to fall. 3 missed practices, 3 strikes. In his world, the math is simple. The office door is partially open, and he can hear the familiar sounds of the school coming to life. Locker doors slamming, students laughing, the distant hum of morning announcements. But his focus is locked on the decision before him. He's made this choice before with other players, and each time it felt like tough love. Each time it felt necessary. His assistant coach, David Park, knocks softly and enters. At 35, Park represents a newer generation of coaching, one more focused on understanding than demanding. "Coach, before you make any decisions about Malik, maybe we should." "Should what?" Reynolds looks up, his decision already hardening. "Should ignore the rules, should make exceptions. That's not how championship teams are built, David." Park sits down across from him, choosing his words carefully. "I'm just saying, maybe there's more to the story. These kids, they're dealing with things we didn't have to deal with when we were their age." Reynolds leans back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. Every generation thinks they're the first to face hardship. These boys need structure, not sympathy. They need to learn that in the real world, showing up isn't negotiable. What Coach Reynolds doesn't know is that at this very moment, Malik Johnson is sitting in his AP literature class, exhausted from another sleepless night. Dark circles ring his eyes, and his usual sharp focus has been replaced by a fog of fatigue. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, notices but doesn't comment. She's learned to read the signs of students carrying invisible weights. Malik's phone buzzes with a text from Tommy. "Coach is making a decision today. You need to talk to him." But how do you explain to a man who sees the world in black and white that sometimes survival requires choosing between the thing you love and the people you love? How do you tell a coach who preaches about team commitment that sometimes commitment to family has to come first? Back in the office, Reynolds picks up his red pen with finality. "I'm calling him in during lunch. If he can't commit to this team, then this team can't commit to him." The morning passes with the weight of inevitability. Students move through their classes, unaware that in a few hours a decision will be made that will ripple through the school, through the community, and through the life of a young man who has never asked for pity, only understanding. At 12:30 p.m. the call comes over the intercom. "Malik Johnson, please report to Coach Reynolds' office." Malik's stomach drops. He knows what's coming. He's seen this scene play out with other students, other athletes. The walk to the athletic wing feels like a death march, each step heavier than the last. Coach Reynolds is waiting, the team roster spread across his desk like evidence in a trial. Malik enters and takes the seat across from him, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes focused on the floor. "Malik," the coach's voice is stern but not unkind. "You know why you're here." "Yes, sir." 3 missed practices, no communication, no explanation. Reynolds pauses, giving Malik a chance to respond. When silence fills the space, he continues. "I built this program on accountability. Every player who's worn this jersey has known that showing up isn't optional, it's essential." Malik's jaw tightens. Part of him wants to explain, to pour out the story of his double shifts at the warehouse, his mother's medical bills, his little sister who depends on him to pick her up from school because there's no one else. But another part of him, the part that's learned to survive through silence, keeps his mouth shut. "You're a talented player, Malik, but talent without commitment is just potential wasted." Reynolds picks up the roster. "I'm removing you from the team, effective immediately." The words hit Malik like a physical blow. Basketball isn't just a sport for him, it's hope. It's a scholarship opportunity. It's a way out of the cycle that has trapped his family for generations. But he doesn't argue. He doesn't plead. He simply nods, stands up, and walks toward the door. "Malik," the coach's voice stops him at the threshold. "If you can prove you're ready to commit, if you can show me that this team is a priority, the door isn't permanently closed." Malik doesn't turn around. He doesn't trust his voice not to break. He simply walks out, leaving behind the echo of his footsteps and the shattered pieces of his dreams. What neither of them realizes is that someone has been listening. Someone who understands that leadership isn't about rules, it's about understanding the people you're trusted to guide. Someone who knows that the most important lessons often come not from talking, but from asking the right questions. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across the empty gymnasium. Practice has ended, and most students have gone home, but Coach Reynolds remains in his office, paperwork scattered across his desk. The decision about Malik weighs heavier than he expected. He tells himself it was necessary, that discipline must be maintained, but something feels unsettled. A soft knock on his door interrupts his thoughts. "Come in." The man who enters is unmistakable, tall, dignified, with a presence that commands attention without demanding it. Denzel Washington steps into the office, and Coach Reynolds immediately stands, surprised and slightly starstruck. "Mr. Washington, I didn't expect." Reynolds extends his hand, which Denzel shakes with a warm smile. "Coach Reynolds, I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. I've heard great things about your program." Reynolds quickly clears a chair, his usual composure shaken by the unexpected visit. "Please have a seat. This is an honor. What brings you to Jefferson High?" Denzel settles into the chair with the easy grace of someone comfortable in any room. "I'm working on a project about education, about the impact coaches and teachers have on young lives. I've been visiting schools, talking to educators who are making a difference." "That's incredible. I mean, we try our best here, building character, teaching discipline." Reynolds trails off, suddenly self-conscious about his methods. "I actually observed your practice yesterday," Denzel mentions casually. "Impressive discipline. I noticed one of your players was missing, though." The comment hits Reynolds like a curveball. "Malik Johnson, I had to make a difficult decision about him today, removed him from the team." Denzel's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in his eyes. "I see. That must have been hard for you." "It was the right decision," Reynolds says quickly, defensive. 3 missed practices. No communication. I can't run a program where players think showing up is optional." "Of course not," Denzel agrees. "Consistency is important. Tell me about Malik. What kind of player is he?" Reynolds's posture relaxes slightly. "Incredibly talented. Natural athlete, great court vision. He could have been special, but," he shrugs, "talent without commitment is just wasted potential." Denzel nods thoughtfully. "And what do you know about his life outside of basketball?" The question catches Reynolds off guard. "Outside of basketball? I mean, I know he's a good student, lives with his mother, but honestly, I don't get too involved in their personal lives. I find it's better to keep those boundaries clear." Denzel leans forward slightly, his voice gentle but probing. "In all my years in this business, I've learned that the most important stories are often the ones happening between the lines. May I ask you something, Coach?" "Of course." "When you made the decision to remove Malik from the team, did you ask him why he missed those practices?" The question hangs in the air like a challenge. Reynolds shifts uncomfortably. I gave him opportunities to explain. He chose to remain silent." "He chose to remain silent," Denzel repeats, his tone neutral. "Or perhaps he felt he couldn't speak." Reynolds frowns. "I don't understand." "Sometimes," Denzel says slowly, "the strongest people are the ones who suffer in silence. They're taught from a young age that asking for help is weakness, that explaining circumstances is making excuses. They carry burdens that would break most of us, and they do it without complaint." The office feels smaller suddenly, the weight of the conversation pressing down on both men. Reynolds looks at the team roster still spread across his desk, Malik's name crossed out in red ink. "What are you suggesting?" Reynolds asks. "I'm not suggesting anything," Denzel replies. "I'm just sharing what I've learned." Real leadership isn't about maintaining rules. It's about understanding the people you're trusted to guide. It's about asking the right questions, even when it's uncomfortable. Reynolds stares at his hands. I've been coaching for 20 years. I've built this program on discipline and accountability. If I start making exceptions. Who said anything about exceptions? Denzel interrupts gently. I'm talking about understanding, about meeting people where they are, not where you think they should be. A long silence fills the office. Outside, the custodial staff begins their evening routine, the sound of vacuum cleaners and closing doors creating a distant hum. What would you do? Reynolds asks finally. Denzel smiles, but it's not condescending. It's the smile of someone who has faced similar crossroads. I'd ask myself if I was more interested in being right or being helpful, and then I'd ask the question I should have asked from the beginning. Which is, what's really going on? Denzel stands, straightening his jacket. Sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is admit they don't have all the information. Sometimes the strongest thing they can do is ask for help understanding. He moves toward the door, then pauses. Coach, you have an opportunity here, not just to help Malik, but to become the kind of leader who sees beyond the surface. The kind who understands that sometimes the players who need the most support are the ones who ask for it the least. As Denzel reaches for the door handle, Reynolds calls out, "How do I fix this?" Denzel turns back, his expression warm. You start by asking the right question, and then you listen, really listen to the answer. After Denzel leaves, Coach Reynolds sits alone in his office, staring at the red line through Malik's name. For the first time in his 20-year career, he questions not just a decision, but the philosophy that guided it. The gymnasium lights dim automatically, casting the office in shadows. But something else is illuminating, a growing understanding that leadership isn't about having all the answers. Sometimes, it's about having the courage to ask the right questions. The next morning arrives with the weight of unfinished business. Coach Reynolds barely slept, Denzel Washington's words echoing in his mind. What's really going on? The question seems simple, but it carries the weight of 20 years of assumptions, of rules applied without context, of leadership that demanded compliance without understanding. At 7:30 a.m., he picks up his phone and dials Malik's number. The call goes to voicemail. He tries again an hour later. Same result. By his third attempt, he realizes that perhaps some conversations can't happen over the phone. Some truths require showing up. During his lunch break, Reynolds drives to the address listed in Malik's student file. The neighborhood is a 20-minute drive from the school, but it feels like a different world. The houses are smaller, older, with yards that show the wear of working families doing their best with limited resources. He finds Malik's address, a modest single-story home with a chain-link fence and a small garden where someone has taken care to plant flowers despite the cracked sidewalk. As he approaches the front door, he hears voices inside, a woman's voice, tired but patient, and a child's laughter. His knock is answered by a woman in her early 40s, wearing scrubs with the logo of St. Mary's Hospital. Her name tag reads, Angela Johnson, RN. She looks surprised to see him. You must be Coach Reynolds, she says, her voice polite but guarded. Malik mentioned you might stop by. Mrs. Johnson, I was hopping to speak with Malik if he's available. She studies his face for a moment, then steps aside. He's in the kitchen with his sister. Please come in. The living room is small but clean, with a couch that's seen better days and a coffee table covered in medical bills and homework assignments. On the mantel, Reynolds notices a framed photo of Malik in his jersey mid-jump shot, his face intense with concentration. Next to it, a smaller photo shows a man in military uniform, Malik's father, he assumes. Malik, Angela calls toward the kitchen. Coach Reynolds is here. Malik appears in the doorway, his 7-year-old sister Zoe peeking out from behind him. The little girl has the same bright eyes as her brother, but hers are filled with curiosity rather than the weight that Reynolds now notices in Malik's. "Coach," Malik says simply, his voice neutral. "Malik, I wanted to talk to you about what happened yesterday." Angela Johnson steps forward. "Coach, maybe we should all sit down. I think there are some things you need to know." They settle into the living room, Zoe curling up next to her brother on the couch. Reynolds takes the chair across from them, suddenly feeling like he's the one on trial. "Malik didn't want me to say anything," Angela begins, her voice steady but strained. "He made me promise not to interfere, but after what happened yesterday," she pauses, looking at her son, "some things are more important than keeping promises." Reynolds leans forward, finally ready to listen. "6 months ago, I was diagnosed with lupus," Angela continues. "It's manageable, but the treatment is expensive, and I've had to cut my hours at the hospital. The insurance doesn't cover everything, and..." She gestures toward the stack of bills on the coffee table. "Mom," Malik says quietly, his voice carrying a mix of embarrassment and protectiveness. "No, baby. He needs to know." Angela turns back to Reynolds. "Malik has been working at Wilson's warehouse after school and on weekends, 20 hours a week, sometimes more. He gives me every penny to help with the medical bills and to make sure Zoe has what she needs." Reynolds feels something cold settle in his stomach, the practices he missed. "Were days when I had treatment and couldn't pick up Zoe from school," Angela finishes. "Malik had to leave work early to get her, which meant he couldn't make it to practice. He could have asked someone else to help, but..." She looks at her son with a mixture of pride and sadness. "He didn't want to burden anyone." "I told him he should talk to you," she continues. "Explain the situation, but he said you made it clear that explanations were excuses." The words hit Reynolds like a physical blow. He remembers saying those exact words, remembers the pride he felt in his unwavering standards. Now they sound hollow, cruel even. "There's more," Angela says softly. "Tell him about the scholarship meeting, Malik." Malik shakes his head, but his mother presses on. "He missed the meeting with the scout from state because I had a reaction to my medication and had to go to the emergency room. He spent the night in the hospital with me instead of meeting with the man who could have changed his future." Reynolds stares at this young man who has been carrying the weight of his family's survival while maintaining his grades, working 20 hours a week, and still showing up to practice whenever humanly possible. The player he saw as uncommitted was actually the most committed person he'd ever met. "Why didn't you tell me?" Reynolds asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Malik meets his eyes for the first time since he entered the house. "Because I didn't want pity. I wanted to earn my place on the team. I wanted to prove that I could handle everything without making excuses." "And because," Angela adds, "he didn't think you'd care about the why. He thought you'd only care about the result." The silence that follows is heavy with the weight of missed opportunities and misunderstood intentions. Finally, Reynolds speaks. "I was wrong." The words come out rough, as if they're scraping against his throat. "I was so focused on what I thought was important that I forgot about what actually matters." He looks at this family. This mother fighting a chronic illness while working full-time. This little girl who depends on her big brother. This young man who has been quietly heroic in ways that Reynolds never bothered to discover. Angela stands up and walks to the kitchen, returning with a worn notebook. She hands it to Reynolds. "This is Malik's schedule. He wrote it out to show me how he was trying to balance everything." Reynolds opens the notebook and sees pages of meticulous planning. Monday, school 8:3, work 4:8, pick up Zoe 8:30, homework 9:11. Tuesday, school 8:3, practice 3:30-5:30, work 6:10, homework 10:30-12. Wednesday, school 8:3, mom's doctor appointment 3:30-5, pick up Zoe 5:30, work 6:10. The schedule continues like this, every day accounted for, every hour planned with military precision. "He's been doing this for 6 months, Angela explains. Trying to make everything work, trying to be everywhere he needed to be. Do you see the days he marked in red? Reynolds looks closer. 3 dates are circled in red ink with MISSED practice written next to them. Next to those dates are small notes. Mom in ER, Zoe sick, no babysitter, double shift, rent due. He cried that night, Angela continues, her voice breaking slightly. The first time he missed practice. He came home and cried because he thought he was letting everyone down. I told him he was the strongest person I knew, but he said strength didn't matter if he couldn't keep his commitments. Reynolds feels his throat tighten. Mrs. Johnson, There's something else, she interrupts gently. Show him the letter, Malik. Malik hesitates, then reaches into his backpack and pulls out a folded piece of paper. He hands it to Reynolds reluctantly. It's a letter, written in Malik's careful handwriting. Coach Reynolds, I know I've missed practice 3 times this month. I know that's unacceptable. I know you have rules for a reason and I've broken them. I want to explain why, but I also know that explanations sound like excuses, and you've made it clear that excuses don't matter. My mom has lupus. She's fighting it every day, but some days the fight is harder than others. I work at Wilson's warehouse to help with the medical bills. I pick up my little sister from school when my mom has treatments. I do these things because they're what my father would have done if he were still here. I love basketball. I love this team. I love the feeling of being part of something bigger than myself. But I also love my family, and sometimes love means choosing between the things that matter most to you. I understand if you need to kick me off the team. I understand that rules are rules. But I want you to know that every practice I missed was a choice that broke my heart. I want you to know that I've never taken this team for granted, not even for a moment. I hope someday you'll understand that sometimes the most committed people are the ones who have to make the hardest choices. Respectfully, Malik Johnson. Reynolds reads the letter twice, his vision blurring. When did you write this? The night before you called me into your office, Malik says quietly. I was going to give it to you, but then I thought, what's the point? You'd already made up your mind. He wrote 5 different versions, Angela adds. Stayed up until 2 a.m. trying to find the right words. Words that would help you understand without sounding like he was making excuses. Reynolds looks at this family, really looks at them. He sees the medical equipment in the corner that he missed before, the prescription bottles on the counter, the homework assignments that Malik helps his sister with while balancing his own studies. He sees a family that has been quietly heroic, asking for nothing except the chance to survive and thrive. Malik, he says, his voice thick with emotion, I want you back on the team, but more than that, I want to figure out how we can help, how the team can help, how I can help. Malik's carefully constructed composure finally cracks. Coach, I don't know if I can do everything. The practices, the games, work, taking care of Zoe. What if I let you down again? You never let me down, Reynolds says firmly. I let you down. I created an environment where you felt like you couldn't ask for help, where you felt like being human was a weakness. He turns to Angela. What do you need, really? What would make this easier? Angela wipes her eyes. I don't know, we've been managing on our own for so long. You don't have to manage alone anymore, Reynolds says. That's what teams are for. That's what community is for. Over the next hour, they talk. Really talk. Angela explains the unpredictability of her condition, the financial stress, the guilt she feels watching her son sacrifice his opportunities for her health. Malik talks about his fear of being seen as weak, his determination to prove himself worthy without special treatment, his love for the game that kept him going even when everything else felt overwhelming. Zoe, who has been quietly listening, finally speaks up. Malik always says he has to be strong for us, but who's strong for Malik? The question hangs in the air, profound in its simplicity. Reynolds looks at this 7-year-old girl who has just articulated something he's been missing for 20 years of coaching. You know what, Zoe? You're absolutely right, and I think it's time we change that. Reynolds pulls out his phone and starts making calls. First, he calls David Park, his assistant coach. David, I need you to research our student-athlete support programs, all of them. And I need you to contact the Boosters Association about emergency financial assistance. He pauses, looking at the Johnson family. Because I just learned that taking care of our players means taking care of their families too. The next call is to the athletic director. Jim, it's Marcus. I need to talk to you about revising our practice schedule. We need more flexibility, more understanding of our players' circumstances. Then he calls Tommy Martinez, the team captain. Tommy, I need you to organize a team meeting for tomorrow. We're going to talk about what it really means to be a team. And I need you to start a phone tree. I want to know if any of our players are struggling with anything at all. As he makes each call, Reynolds feels something shifting inside him. The rigid structure that he thought was strength was actually a wall that prevented him from truly leading. Real leadership, he realizes, isn't about demanding compliance. It's about creating space for people to be human, to struggle, to ask for help when they need it. There's something else, he says, hanging up from his final call. Malik, I want you to know, you never missed practice because you didn't care. You missed practice because you cared too much. There's a difference, and I should have seen it. Angela Johnson reaches over and squeezes her son's hand. Baby, you've been carrying this family for months. Maybe it's time to let someone help carry you. But what if I'm not good enough anymore? Malik asks, his voice small. What if I've been away from the game too long? What if I can't keep up? Reynolds leans forward. Malik, you've been keeping up with school, work, family responsibilities, and basketball all at the same time. You think kids who only have to worry about basketball are somehow stronger than you. You think they're more committed than someone who gives up his dreams to sit in a hospital room with his mother. He stands up, his mind racing with possibilities. I need to make some more calls. The athletic department has resources, connections. We can figure out tutoring for Zoe, maybe adjust practice schedules, connect you with some of the fundraising programs. There's a network of support that you shouldn't have to access alone. Coach, Malik interrupts. Why are you doing this? Reynolds pauses, thinking of Denzel Washington's words, of the question that changed everything. Because someone reminded me that real leadership isn't about maintaining rules. It's about understanding the people you're trusted to guide. And because I'm learning that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who suffer in silence. He looks at the letter in his hands, at the schedule in the notebook, at the family that has been quietly heroic. And because I realize that I've been so focused on teaching you about commitment that I forgot to show you what commitment really looks like. Commitment isn't just showing up, it's showing up for each other when life gets hard. As he prepares to leave, Reynolds turns back to the family. Malik, I want you to know something. Every coach talks about building character. But you don't need me to build your character. You already have more character than most adults I know. What you need is someone who recognizes that character, who supports it, who helps you use it to achieve your dreams rather than just survive your circumstances. Walking back to his car, Reynolds feels the weight of a lesson learned almost too late. His phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is admit they don't have all the information. Proud of you for asking the right question. D. He looks back at the house, where through the window he can see Malik helping Zoe with her homework, Angela preparing for her evening shift. A family that has been quietly heroic, asking for nothing except the chance to survive and thrive. Tomorrow he'll call a team meeting. Tomorrow, he'll share what he's learned about true commitment, about hidden strength, about the difference between discipline and understanding. Tomorrow, he'll begin the process of becoming the leader his players deserved all along. But tonight, he sits in his car and considers the power of a single question. What's really going on? It's a question that doesn't just change how we see others. It changes how we see ourselves. It's a question that transforms rules into understanding, judgment into compassion, and leadership into service. And sometimes, it's the question that saves not just a player's career, but a coach's soul. Epilogue: the lesson learned. 3 months later, the gymnasium at Jefferson High School still buzzes with the same fluorescent lights, still echoes with the sound of sneakers on hardwood. But something fundamental has changed. The team that takes the court now carries themselves differently, not just as individual players, but as a family that understands the weight each member bears. Malik Johnson stands at the free throw line, his form perfect, his concentration absolute. But more than that, he stands as a young man who no longer carries his burdens alone. The team rallied around the Johnson family, organizing fundraisers, providing tutoring for Zoe, and creating a support system that extends far beyond basketball. Coach Reynolds watches from the sideline, his understanding of leadership forever changed. He's learned that true strength isn't about demanding compliance. It's about creating space for people to be human, to struggle, to ask for help when they need it. The lesson that Denzel Washington offered that day in the office has rippled through the entire program. Sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is admit they don't have all the information. Sometimes the strongest thing they can do is ask for help understanding. As the final buzzer sounds on another victory, the players gather around their coach. But the real victory isn't on the scoreboard. It's in the knowledge that they've learned something that will serve them long after their playing days are over. They've learned that everyone is fighting battles we know nothing about. That strength often looks like silence. That true leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions. And sometimes, when life turns the tables, the most important lesson comes not from knowing what to say, but from knowing what to ask. What's really going on? It's a question that can change everything.